outcomes and policies. During this webinar, you will learn about outcomes of green building and affordable multifamily housing and the need to implement policies at the state level to incentivize green building. My name is Janet Viveros, and I'm a Senior Research Associate at the National Housing Conference. Presenting on today's webinar, we have Alex Trachtenberg of Southface, an organization that promotes sustainable homes, workplaces, and communities through education, research, advocacy, and technical assistance. Also speaking on today's webinar is Andrew McCoy from the Virginia Center for Housing Research at Virginia Tech University, an interdisciplinary research and information source on housing. And finally, joining Alex and Andrew is Orlando Arts from the Community Housing Partners, a nonprofit social enterprise creating healthy, sustainable, and affordable homes and communities in the southeastern United States. I'd like to thank Capital One for sponsoring today's NHC webinar series. However, any opinions or errors are ours alone. Joining us today is Leila Sinikun, from Senior Manager of the CRA Business Development, Community Development Banking at Capital One. Today, Leila is going to make some opening welcome comments. Leila?
With Capital One Community Development Banking, and it's a pleasure to do the welcome here on this installment for NHC's conference webinar series. We think this is an especially important topic and are especially excited. Green building and multifamily affordable housing, it's an area that has great promise for both sustainability of affordable housing and the health and quality of life of residents. And so we are glad to be able to sponsor this opportunity and look forward to learning as well. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you to NHC and the panelists. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you, Leila. Now, before I hand over the reins to our panelists today, I want to make a few more introductory notes. First, let's address technical difficulties. While we hope the webinar runs smoothly for everyone, we all know this doesn't always happen. If you run into any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the Help menu that you can see on the sample toolbar on my slide, or visit support.citrixonline.com for assistance. Now let's cover another frequent question that many attendees have, which is this webinar being recorded? The answer is yes. We are recording this webinar, and we'll make an archived copy of it available several days after the webinar is over. We'll email a link out to everyone who registered once the recording is online, as well as a link to the panelists' slides. Now, at the end of the webinar, we will take your questions. However, you can submit your questions at any time via the question toolbar that you see outlined here in red and the sample GoToWebinar toolbar. Feel free to submit your question at any time, and then we will get to them at the end of the webinar. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand the reins over to Alex.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Alex.
Okay, so thanks to everyone for attending today. We're really excited to talk about our research project and the implications it may have on affordable housing policy in the Southeast and nation. You'll see here on the opening slide, this is an image of a case study property that we used in our research project called The Impact of Green Affordable Housing, in which we're evaluating green and non-green affordable housing in the regional Southeast United States. As Janet discussed earlier, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in Atlanta, Georgia. Our mission is to promote sustainable homes, workplaces, and communities through education, research, advocacy, and technical assistance. We've been around since 1978, and we're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I encourage you all to check out our website and see how we can help you become more sustainable. We're structured around the built environment, so we have various teams. We have commercial sustainability services that works on a program, for instance, called Grants to Green. It helps nonprofit organizations in the metro Atlanta area save money on water and energy. We have a residential team that administers our green building program that we developed in 1999 with the Greater Atlanta Home Builders Association called Earthcraft. Many of our properties that we'll discuss the analysis and findings of today are indeed Earthcraft multifamily certified properties. We also work on the home energy rating system. We have a community sustainability services team, which is my team. And as I said, we have been working on the impact of green affordable housing project for the past year, which I am the project manager. The City Energy Project is another initiative of ours in which the City of Atlanta just recently passed a commercial benchmarking ordinance for commercial properties over 25,000 square feet. Policy, we have a policy team that works on the, for instance, the Energy Efficiency for All project, operated by the Natural Resources Defense Council, National Housing Trust, JPB Foundation, Energy Foundation, and many other partners. So working to advocate for a multifamily affordable housing utility incentive program. We have a communications and development team. We have a Sustainable Atlanta Roundtable that we do monthly on a different sustainability topic. And we do a whole host of education and trainings here at Southface on energy codes across the region and country, as well as different credentialing and certification bodies such as the Building Performance Institute. Now to get into the project. As I said, we've been working on the impact of green affordable housing research project for the past year. And our goals are to, as you see on the screen, evaluate and support green affordable housing in policy and planning. We tend to think this is a great idea anecdotally. We need to get more data to prove from an economic, environmental, societal, equitable point of view that this makes sense for policymakers and planners with making housing decisions for our residents in our states. We hope to be able to share this data with other researchers and academics across the region and country. And as I'd indicated before, we want to really have an enhanced understanding of the costs and benefits, everything that goes into it, from the beginning of the deal to the end when it's got its certificate of occupancy and you have actual residents in the units, in the apartments. What is it really doing for all the people involved? Is it saving them money on utilities? Is it saving them money on construction costs? Things like that. We also hope that this encourages increased adoption, particularly in our region of the Southeast, where some of our states are a little more hesitant to adopt some green building certifications and or technologies, much like Georgia has, which gets very high marks in certain publications that other organizations put out, like Global Green USA, if you're familiar with their QAP analysis. Georgia ranks in the top 10 of that review. And then we hope to influence appropriations and budgeting. We hope that these incentives and subsidy programs, such as the low-income housing tax credit, those things are preserved and expanded and hopefully have more standards for them to develop green. You know, we hear a little bit from developers and folks like that, you know, green costs too much, it's hurting my bottom line, I can't do it, it's too difficult. We really want to push back on that and be able to have actual, you know, firsthand collected data and analysis that shows, hopefully, that this is a great undertaking and it does provide immense benefits to all stakeholders involved. A little bit more about our project. So these are all multifamily affordable housing developers. We're looking in 4 states, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Georgia being kind of a leader in affordable housing in the region, gets very high marks for sustainability efforts. And the other states are maybe not quite as green, but are doing some great things and have some great case studies and properties to evaluate as well. We're looking at recently constructed or rehabbed properties. So these are typically properties that that were occupied anywhere from about 2010 to 2012. They have at least 12 months of occupancy data and utility history, so we can analyze that and have a good understanding of that trajectory. They are affordable. They are low-income housing tax credit properties, subsidized, public housing, et cetera. And we're comparing data across many types of developments, the majority of which are new construction. We do have some rehab. There are family and senior and elderly, low-rise, mid-rise, and high-rise. The majority are either low-rise or mid-rise. We have one high-rise property, which is actually also a historic rehab and a supportive special needs property. So we've actually excluded that from our whole comprehensive analysis, but it will be receiving its own external analysis the same way as any other property would have. And we want to analyze and evaluate the cost benefit, the triple bottom line, the economic, environmental, and social or equity concerns for all stakeholders, that being the residents who ultimately this is going to serve, the property managers, the developer owners, as well as the housing finance agencies, the HFAs. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what we've been up to for the last year, our first task was to do some preliminary analysis and research. So we conducted outreach to a variety of affordable housing stakeholders to help us refine our project goals. identify resources, build partnerships. Then we moved on to partner recruitment engagement. This is where we kind of solicited support from affordable developers, multifamily developers that either had green buildings or not green buildings. We wanted to try and have an equal distribution of each in each state as possible. But as you'll see, a lot of what the housing policy and the qualified allocation plan dictates for each state, and based upon our goal to have recently constructed properties, some states such as Georgia only have green properties within them. But we do have an ability to measure against other national benchmarks. Research design, we did our methodology, determined how we are going to collect data and evaluate. And then task 4, development identification and data access, setting up the process for property managers and owners to give us information for utility tracking, which we did through WeGoWise. And then also, finally, the longest task of ours was data collection and research analysis. So we took a lot of time and effort to work with our partners, our participants in the study, to collect cost data, O&M data, utility data by getting release forms from tenants and/or residents, and also doing our research analysis, doing comparative and quantitative and qualitative analysis on the data we were able to collect from our participants. And then finally, task 6, which is what we are concluding now, our final report and our communications and outreach. We're happy to be on this call today with the National Housing Conference and all of you. So our methods and data resources, to get in a little more detail from what I was discussing previously, we did a peer review of literature. We did a literature review, internal and external research. We formed an advisory committee made up of academics, researchers, developers, property managers, a pretty diverse group of folks involved in affordable housing. And we collected development and construction costs. Most of this data came in the form of cost certifications that are submitted to the HFAs and/or AIA G702 documents. We also did a whole host of surveys using Survey Gizmo. We did development and construction-based surveys, construction and specification surveys to fine-tune our methods and understandings of the data and what we were actually putting into the analysis and making sure we were covering everything as necessary. And also a property management survey and a resident survey. And on the resident side, with regard to collecting utility account information as well as surveys, we used a HUD multifamily sampling rate. And finally, we also conducted an HFA survey of our 4 study state housing finance agencies in Alabama, Georgia, and both of the Carolinas. Finally, in a little bit more detail on project methods and data resources. On the O&M side, we collected budget reports, financial statements, account audits to get an idea of what is being spent on maintenance and operations of the buildings, utilities. We actually do live utility account tracking through WeGoWise, which is a great resource if you all have not been able to use yet, very similar to some other benchmarking tools out there like Energy Star Portfolio Manager, but WeGoWise has a little bit more of a robust multifamily benchmarking capabilities. And like I said before, we use the HUD multifamily sampling rate for that as well. We also benchmarked against national averages for green and non-green properties of the same building types through RS means. We're looking at some county and state health data because we asked some health-oriented questions of our residents in the resident survey. And we're performing comparative statistical analysis and qualitative analysis. And you'll see over here on the image on the right, this is kind of an example of what the WeGoWise dashboard looks like. Now to the participants. We were able to get 10 green developments, well actually 11 if you include the high-rise property that I discussed before, which is a little bit of an outlier, a little bit of a different property from most of our other green properties. It's our only high-rise. It's a historic rehab in downtown Atlanta, and it's supportive special needs housing. So there's a lot of different variables going into that we wanted to take out and give it its own explanation because we believe it provides value. It's a good thing to do. It can be a great way to help address homelessness, addiction, and any other kinds of special needs that people in our communities may have. So see, it's a fairly even distribution between urban and rural, and it's not necessarily evenly distributed between states. A lot of that is a function of, as I mentioned before, the qualified allocation plans and what they're requiring in these recent iterations of those plans. Georgia incentivizes heavily things like Earthcraft and LEED, green building programs, as well as National Green Building Standard and others, as well as some different green technologies. And North Carolina similarly has certain requirements for Energy Star of their properties as well. But generally most of these are low or mid-rise properties there's a fairly even distribution between family or senior, and most of them tend to be under 100,000 square feet, somewhere between 30 and maybe about 60 or so, 70,000 or so square feet. So on the non-green side, most of these were in Alabama, with a couple in South Carolina. We weren't able to get quite as many South Carolina properties as we had hoped for. It's just we as an organization don't have as many contacts there. We just weren't able to get as much support or interest from folks in that state. But we were able to get 3 South Carolina properties. The rest of them did have 5 developments in each state. And you'll see there's a fairly similar trend here with urban and rural, and the size of the developments are much more comparable in the non-green side, but the resident type is very similar too. And yeah, that's about it from me. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Andrew McCoy with the Virginia Center for Housing Research. And I'll let him talk to you about some of our findings and results from the research project. And I thank you for my time.
Thank you, Alex. Also want to thank Janet and NHC. Thank Southface. It's been nice to work with you on this project. Some exciting parts of the industry that we're seeing. And also thank you to Community Housing Partners for being part of this as well. It's nice to have a full discussion. Let me just make sure I can get the screen going here. So hopefully everybody can see. This is where where Alex just left off. Just to tell you a little bit about the Virginia Center, we were established by the Virginia Legislature in 1989 as the state's housing research center. As Janet was nice enough to say early on, we are an interdisciplinary study, research, and information resource for the Commonwealth, but increasingly over the last 25 years, we've really started doing national and international work in housing studies and economic impact as well. We are increasingly doing a lot more with housing-related data services as well, and we're working hard to do what we think is trying to solve the nation's critical housing needs through research related to housing affordability, sustainability, and innovative housing technologies. And this project is one good example of that. So just before I get into the preliminary findings, I do want to emphasize that part of it. We do have a final report that is coming out soon, but these are preliminary findings. Just for example, last night we had one area that we looked into a little further, and we realized that we wanted to highlight that in the discussion today in the presentation. You'll see that, and I can talk about that a little bit more. So we are actively working through a lot of these data, but we're excited to show you what we're finding at this point. As Alex mentioned, there are sites all around the southeast, and the map to the right here shows you, pinpoints a lot of the locations for those sites. We have a lot of different ways that we've gone out and tried to collect these data, and that's kind of my first general comment, is that the more that I do work in our industry and try to research our industry, the more I see the need that we continue to look for detailed and accurate information on what we're doing. There are some sources, and there are lots of sources when it comes to housing, but the construction side and the cost side of this is especially an area where we see this as a nice step towards having better information, especially when it comes to green buildings and the green building process. Here are, on this screen, you can see the different ways that we've tried to make sure we are collecting good data on what's happening at the various sites that Alex mentioned before. We have, from QAPs, we have total costs, direct costs, and indirect costs for these developments. Then we also did a development and construction survey with 48 responses where we tried to also get a second opinion or a third opinion on some of those costs that we were seeing. And nicely, we had a lot of industry panel support where we were able to run some of these costs by people in the industry or even our methods and make sure that they agreed that it looks like a good approach. We also did a property management survey. We will present on some of that today. Resident survey, we'll present on a little bit of that today with a lot of responses there around satisfaction and other areas within the units themselves that these people, the people who are living there are experiencing. We also did a HFA survey. We won't spend much time on that today. We'll talk about WeGoWise data just a little bit. So in general, to start off, what we are seeing is that the cost of green building processes are comparable to new standard construction. In this slide, you can see that the total cost of green building is 1.61% based on QAP cost data across the different developments. Now, keep in mind that the green data come from predominantly Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina developments versus the non-green that were predominantly Alabama and South Carolina. In the hard cost side of the equation, we're seeing that green buildings are running about 2% higher in cost per square foot, but in the soft cost side of it, we're seeing that they are running about 6.5% less. And in the box to the lower right, you can see the way that we're breaking down hard costs versus soft costs. But hard costs basically are materials, labor, and equipment directly used in the construction of the building. Soft costs would be design and construction fees associated with the management of the development process, mostly. We feel like that, or in looking at these data, we feel that it suggests that a lot of the green building processes have now diffused into the industry quite well. We're seeing that there's not a huge cost difference there between the two different types of processes. If we were to break down then those costs into detailed square foot numbers as well, at the top of the screen you see a table dealing with hard costs, and at the bottom of the screen you see a table dealing with soft costs. We were able to look at the QAP documents and break down and organize costs based on certain sections that would then relate to national cost data such as RS means easily, and that's something that we'll talk about in a little while, that we've tried to objectively relate those to these other national cost data. So what we're seeing in the hard cost area is that green developments are typically characterized, on average, by lower substructure costs, lower shell costs, and lower costs for equipment and furnishings in the construction of the buildings. The non-green developments typically have lower interior costs, lower services, and lower special construction costs. When it comes to the soft costs themselves, green developments are typically characterized by lower contractor services, including overhead, profit, and general requirements. And you see here site development in red. This is an example of where we had talked to our industry panel and looked at these numbers with them, and we really got into details of site development, land acquisition costs in this area, and we realized that there might be some ways that the QAP was accounting for certain costs here, but not for other costs. So in the top line numbers we gave on the previous slide, we pulled the site development costs out, but we wanted to kind of show the process of that. So we wanted to hold those, all costs equal without the site development and see where we were. When we add those back in, we find that the green developments actually are considerably lower in cost from the soft cost side of things. Also, they are lower in the construction financing, the permits and fees, which was interesting to us, and then the developer fees. Non-green developments are characterized by lower professional services, architectural and engineering subcontracts, for example, and startup and reserve fees for the development. All right, if we then look at the operations and management square foot costs that we're seeing on the QAPs, we see that overall green costs per square foot are considerably higher, about 15%. Breaking it down into details, the maintenance, we're seeing the costs being reported at about 34% higher. Utilities, not surprisingly, are considerably less for green buildings, and the administration of these buildings we're seeing are about 17% higher for the green buildings than the non-green. We've heard anecdotally that education of maintenance staff and education of administrative staff on the technology of green buildings was needed. You know, if cost is a driver, then we see that is something that's quite an opportunity for these buildings right now and these developments. It seems that the emphasis on energy efficiency is working. If you look at the utilities alone that are being reported in the QA, the documents that we have, and then what we're seeing and what we think is suggested through these data are that the gap between green and non-green buildings, it's probably wider than just simply education of the people working on it, but there needs to be some way of understanding more about where the costs are being driven up in the green maintenance versus non-green or administration as well. If we then try to take a national green cost number that's equivalent to these buildings that we are studying, there's really not a direct comparison. So what we did was we took the specifications of the national cost data of these types of buildings, then we took the specifications that we saw in these buildings of what was being built, and we tried to then basically normalize by adding incrementally pieces to the national cost data that would insert features that were green that we're seeing in these buildings, and try to come to a comparable comparison price per square foot. And that's what these two charts represent. This chart and the next one I'll show you on the next slide. But in this case, what we're seeing is a wide variation and a lot of variability from the national cost data. If you looked at the detailed hard costs in the green buildings, you would see that they vary considerably from development to development, not just here, but also when comparing them across developments. If you were to look at the non-green, you see that they vary less, and we think that that has something to do with path dependency, that the non-green developments have really been able to kind of, on a price per square, cost per square foot basis, ratchet down a lot of the different options and be able to provide a kind of a basic product that they know based on code will be good quality, that they can provide within a certain cost range. With the green developments, we're seeing that that variability actually is considerably more, and so that's one thing that we're noticing is that the green construction side of this, if we can reduce that variability, it seems like quite an opportunity moving forward as to how you build green versus non-green. But looking at the national cost data and RS means the green cost that we have, we're seeing that there's quite a bit of variability in also in the areas of equipment and furnishings or special construction or other. The national cost data, we really don't have any data there. So one thing that we're noticing is that you know, the ability to collect and compare across green data for buildings is something that's really needed. And then this would be looking at the non-green buildings and how they deviate from that that normalized kind of green cost data that we had created. And they actually deviate quite a bit as well in the different categories. What that suggests to us is that there is consistency across the sample from our green and non-green data. Moving forward, this slide represents the developer builder survey responses. In the top bar chart, what we see is the different types of above code green building certifications that the respondents had experience building in, and then the primary motivations being reported for using above code green building certifications. Implementing green technologies. So we're seeing about 63% of the respondents see it as a way to reduce tenant utility bills, 59% reducing operations and maintenance costs, which is interesting, 48% building durability and life cycle, 67% commitment to sustainability, and 22% listed as other. If we look at whether the developer builders who answered the survey responded see above code green buildings as providing scope of work benefits, well, it's there's a central tendency around kind of neutral. You have almost equal amount that agree and disagree to that one. But then if you look at the quality of end product benefits for building these above code green buildings, you see that that central tendency shifts towards the agree and strongly agree. The same survey, if we look at resident utility allowances, if the developer builders feel like that should be reduced by building with above code green buildings, it shifts strongly towards the agree and strongly agree. But then if we look at whether it helps the firm achieve its objectives, well, we see that a large majority either agree or strongly agree. This slide represents some of the resident survey responses. If we ask people, the residents of these units, if their current overall affordability compared to the previous home for green developments, if it's much more affordable, about the same, or much less affordable, we're seeing a majority that say much more affordable, and a large majority about the same or much more affordable. Same with the non-green at the bottom of the slide there. We're seeing that a majority do, although not as much of a majority, say that the new non-green developments are much more affordable for them or about the same. Same with residents that answered the survey on overall satisfaction of comfort and affordability in green developments. 68% say that they're much more satisfied versus 26% that say it's about the same, with a very small amount being less satisfied. The same question basically with the non-green development residents, but new construction. 69% now are saying they're much more satisfied, 29% about the same. So some differences there as well. Looking at the property management and administration survey, we asked about above code green buildings being more energy efficient in their opinion. We had a large majority that said they were neutral on that statement, but then a good many that agreed and strongly agreed. But if we looked at more water efficiency, those numbers change a little bit. We have a higher majority just being neutral, but also about 13% agreeing and 16% strongly agreeing, with 6% strongly disagreeing in that case. Often what we had were comments around the neutrality being because of the rise in utility costs, people couldn't tell a difference from a management and administration level. With the same survey, we asked about above code green buildings having lower utility costs, and we had 56% that were neutral on that, but then 25% strongly agreeing. And then if we ask the same question and combined reduced utility allowance, well, some of the group that had strongly agreed before, it looks like have shifted somewhat, and we have more of a strongly disagree in that chart. Then we asked about above code green buildings requiring a greater level of resident education. Here we see strongly that people seem to either be neutral or towards strongly agree that there is a need of education, something that we've been hearing anecdotally, and now we see it in the property management and administration survey. But then if we look at above code green building certification programs, increase staff knowledge and ability to verify construction and development specs, well, it looks like that they very strongly that most people agree with that or are neutral. Only 8% are disagreeing with that. And finally, just to touch quickly on the WEGO-wise, what's nice about this is, and based on the developments we are studying, we're able to see where a lot of these buildings sit within a kind of less expensive, more expensive, all energy snapshot, or less efficient and more efficient. We have some outliers that seem more expensive and some that are less efficient, but we have a lot that are sitting here in the middle as well. So with the report, we'll be able to get more into all the different characteristics of the different developments. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Orlando and thank everyone for their attention.
All right. Great. Thank you, Andrew. And just want to take this opportunity to thank NHC and Janet for recognizing the importance of this topic and putting this on, and also Alex at Southface and Andrew at Virginia Tech for housing research. We've had the opportunity to work with them a number of times before over the years on the impact of green building and design on our properties. So Community Housing Partners is a nonprofit community development organization. We were established in 1975. We have a history of commitment to being a green organization. CHP started as a volunteer organization doing weatherization work for very low-income families in rural southwestern Virginia. And so our headquarters are located in Christiansburg, Virginia. We have offices in Richmond, Virginia, as well as Inverness, Florida. We are structured in a way that we have a lot of our work is done under the auspices of CHP. We have a real estate development division, construction, architecture, property management, and resident services, and typically they all work together on every project that we undertake. We currently own about 6,000 apartments in over 100 properties in Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, and Kentucky, and we're starting work on projects in South Carolina as well as Maryland. About 60% of our properties have been financed by the low-income housing tax credit, and that is we, in general, really focused on applying for the competitive 9% credit. Over the last 5 years, for example, we have been successful in securing a total of about 14 tax credit commitments in Virginia and South Carolina and North Carolina as well. It's a very diverse population that we serve at our properties, and that includes family properties, elder properties that serve seniors, as well as special needs populations, including previously homeless individuals. Let's see. I'm having a little difficulty looking at the screen here. Let's see. So the next slide, hopefully you're seeing this, because I'm sorry, for some reason I'm not able to see it on my screen, is our participation and involvement in green building and design really goes a long way. It goes back really over 20 years as we were developing multifamily properties. There we go. All right. Okay. And And there, okay, great, thank you. We began really in 2005. A lot of work was done here in Virginia around trying to get the Housing Finance Agency to incorporate green building certification as part of the scoring on tax credit applications. And over the years, that is now a 45-point category on the 9% tax credit application in Virginia. So it's a fairly significant point category. It has resulted in currently every single application that's submitted has checked off that they will be meeting either Earthcraft or LEED standards. But when we first started this, we had really no way of measuring the impact that it would have on our triple bottom line, as Alex said earlier. Really, our expectations were based on the performance, the anticipated performance of the finished product. So based on what we were installing in a property, there was, we would say, well, we expect cost savings of 30% or 40% or 50%, depending on the rating of the HVAC systems and insulation and everything else that was required. But we really had no way of measuring it, and some of our early attempts to do so were not very successful. I mean, we're a nonprofit housing developer and manager and owner. We're not a research organization, and so those early efforts really were not successful in telling us the impact that we were having. It was not until later on in 2007 when we did the first Earthcraft certified multifamily rehab project in the Commonwealth, and that followed. Altogether, we've done 12 of our properties containing over 1,000 apartments have received Earthcraft certification. Our office building in Richmond was one of the first in Virginia to receive Earthcraft light commercial certification, and then we have served as either the architect and or general contractor on nearly 20 Earthcraft certified properties for other owners in Virginia. We can go on to the next slide. Thank you. All right. So as I said, we had this initial commitment to do this work based on our mission. There was this expectation that of savings based on the performance of the finished, product. We had a very difficult time figuring out the methodology to actually be able to measure the savings. And then it wasn't until last year that the Virginia Tech Center for Housing Research, in conjunction with Housing Virginia, was able to demonstrate, was really the first correlation that we were able to be involved in, correlation between Earthcraft certification and savings. And that was a study that I believe included over 15 tax credit projects in Virginia that had been either built or rehabilitated over the last several years. And I would suspect that it was probably the first time that anybody in Virginia was able to see that that correlation. Really, up until that point, it was very anecdotal and a lot of conjecture. One of the things that that came out of that study that's been very important for us is the importance of initial and ongoing resident training. And so we were finding that as we rehabilitated a property, we would do training for residents on the new systems and being able to maintain them and being able to get the most out of those energy savings. But we were only doing it that one time initially. We were doing it as residents were moving in, other new residents were moving into the property, but we were not doing it on a regular, ongoing basis. And so that is something that we have changed in practice. It is so critical. I mean, you can have the most wonderfully energy efficient, building in the universe, and in fact, we have a property in Blacksburg that's a net zero property. It's been certified as net zero. But if the residents have the air conditioning, going and the windows open, it's like you might as well not have done anything in the in the first place. So that ongoing resident training for existing residents as well as new ones is really critical. And then finally, one of the things in the vast majority of our properties, our residents pay the electric bill, and so and we pay obviously the common area electric charges. So one of the things that we are finding, and it would be interesting to see if we could establish more of a correlation, is the savings that those residents are able to accrue as a result of the energy improvements at the property. In Virginia, for example, that study that I mentioned earlier found that residents saved on average about $650 a year on their electric bill. So we're finding that at those properties which are Earthcraft certified, this is again anecdotal, we have not done any very extensive research, that those what I think are fairly modest asset building efforts have resulted in reduced delinquency, rent delinquency at those properties. Certainly in comparison to some of our older properties that have not gone through the same level of energy savings. So those are some of the lessons that we have learned. We continue to learn those lessons every day, and I think these kinds of studies will be very helpful in the future as we make decisions about even around the scope of work on and improving energy efficiency at our properties. So thank you. With that, I'd like to turn it back.
Thank you so much, Orlando. At this point, our panelists are happy to take your questions. So what I'm going to do is read them and let each panelist address them. So the first question is, did you look for any health-related outcomes for residents of the housing projects that you included in your study?
I can take that one. We did ask some questions to try and get at health outcomes. We asked about, compared from your previous to your current home, are you experiencing any less frequency of asthma attacks or respiratory illnesses? We tried to get a better understanding of what their, if any, existing conditions were, and if over the period that they've moved into their new property, has there been any real benefit from living in a green property versus a non-green property? we were seeing not a ton of evidence of any necessarily positive health outcomes. We weren't seeing any negative outcomes either. But for that kind of a study, which is something that I know our organization is very interested in the non-energy benefits side of things and the health outcomes, we want to look more into that more in-depthly. And as I said, it wasn't discussed on this webinar because we are in the midst of doing our final report, which will be released in early September. So we don't know all the different variances and explanations and descriptives of those responses on those particular questions yet, but I can tell you from looking at them from a high level, there's not a ton of difference that we're seeing, but it was not a huge aspect of our research in this endeavor, but it is something that we are planning on looking into in the future. And if you are in the Southeast, I encourage you to reach out to us and we can discuss some more of that. But definitely look out for the final report coming out in early September, which will have much more of a discussion of those kind of things.
Thank you. The next question that came in is why you decided to focus on the South. Was there a reason, or was it just because that's where you are located?
I guess I can take this one as well. Why we looked at the South is generally the South is, in the Southeast, is one of the poorest economic regions, one of the most low-income regions in the country. We're slated to have some of the most construction housing starts in the country. We're really going through a boom here with multifamily development. And so because of those kind of characteristics and the trends that we were seeing and the evolution of qualified allocation plans and the planning and policies for affordable housing, weren't seeing a ton of movement by some other states in the region. And we wanted to kind of show that the kind of initiatives that have been taken by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, for instance, have really, hopefully, as we're seeing in some of the data, are resulting in some positive outcomes for the industry. So the South being very poor, very low income, having a lot of construction starts coming up and a lot of increase in population, we thought this would be, and also because we are based here, so as part of our mission to serve our local communities, regions and states and cities, but that was basically the reason why we decided to focus on the Southeast. There's not a ton of information that's pertinent or specific to the Southeast region. You see a lot of these reports coming out mostly based on the West Coast or the Northeast or the Northwest. There's not a ton going on research of this type on evaluating green building impact in the Southeast or the southern region of the U.S.
Thank you. The next question that came in mentions that you don't touch on markets in older cities where the majority of the affordable housing specified as rents at levels affordable to 60 to 80% of area median income. Basically where affordable housing is owned and operated by private for-profit owners without low-income housing tax credit, subsidy, etc. So I think the question is why you don't look at that. And then there's a second question also, what about green retrofits of properties that are 80 plus years old, which is a large part of the Midwest market?
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to, Alex? I can jump in a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. No, please.
And then you can fill in.
Okay.
As I had said before, the ability to find data is quite difficult on a lot of the work that we're doing here. And the previous study that Orlando mentioned, where in the state of Virginia we focused on the low-income housing tax credit properties, that drove in some ways some of the early conversations about how we could get data and do a study within 1 year that would allow us to start seeing some of the trends that were happening. So there are all kinds of ways that we would love to expand on this and continue the conversation. I think this is really, it's one step in that direction. We knew that we could get certain levels of cost from the QAPs, and we knew which properties were either partners with Southface or were properties that we thought we could get people to give us information as well. So that's kind of the quick answer. Alex, you probably want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what you said, Andrew. I mean, a lot of it is about getting access to information, which is not ultimately very easy. And then part of it on the policy side, I mean, we think that these subsidy programs for maybe some of the low income to extremely low income properties who are serving some of the most disadvantaged residents in these states is very critical and important to serving them. I think you're asking more about what we might call maybe not unsubsidized affordable housing, but maybe workforce style housing or privately owned affordable housing, which is just not as easy for us to access information to those types of properties, and they're not as necessarily interested in participating, maybe, just from their lack thereof a need for the subsidy programs that we're really trying to evaluate because of the purpose and the mission that they're trying to serve for these low-income communities.
Great, thank you. We have another question that came in where the questioner pointed out that in your data, the soft costs seem to be higher on these green projects. And so she's curious as to what your thoughts are on how to bring down those soft costs.
So the soft costs actually in the slide, maybe I went through too quickly, but the soft costs are considerably lower. The hard costs are where we're seeing that the green projects are a little bit higher. And I think Alex and I have talked about this a good bit. One of the interesting pieces of taking out the site development and land acquisition costs in the soft cost side was we got to see how much that plays into the cost per square foot that we see for these projects. Meaning, a lot of the developers that you would talk to out there would probably tell you that even on the green and non-green side, both sides, the construction and the processes around construction, those are processes that they understand, that they have really tried to ratchet down all the different variables and the risks so that they can really deliver a product based on a certain cost per square foot that they're comfortable with being able to produce. And so it's tough to drive down the hard costs too much more in many of these situations. It's a design question, and sometimes it's what the site conditions are, and there's a lot of variables to it. From the soft cost side, that was quite interesting. So it tends to tell us that, or it suggests that the land really and the land acquisition and what might happen on the site for development can play a huge role in how affordable it is, but also that there are some other areas. Permits and fees was interesting. That I would assume that in the green certification process you might have more permits and fees that you have to work with. So that was something that we were interested in seeing, that the green developments reported a lower cost in permits and fees than the non-green. So it seems that the soft cost side is where there is room for saving cost in some ways, and possibly around the land acquisition and what you have to do to the site itself. And we think that that also is a big variance between urban and rural sites. There's a lot going on in those numbers. But the hard costs of the construction itself, there's not a huge amount of room to ratchet those down. And I think that's what happens when you start talking about new technologies and the resistance to innovation in the housing industry from a construction standpoint, is people really depend on that path that they're used to for producing the product at a level that they know they can for a price.
Thank you. So I'm going to throw out one last question, although there are several others that we weren't able to get to that I will follow up with our panelists on and see if they can get the information out to you all. But before we conclude, I just wanted to put a question to you that came from one of the listeners, which is, did you come across any particularly effective training for building owners, operators to support efficient building operations? Any specific content providers or modules you could recommend?
Well, in Orlando, and Alex can touch on this a little better than me, I know that that's something from the previous study that we really flagged as important, and we've been looking into ways that we could have different types of training and test it to see if it's affecting energy use by residents. And So that's the next step for us. We really see that as something that's important, and we're trying to move towards, as opposed to really answering your question about what is out there currently. So
this is Orlando. I just wanted to mention that one of the things that we've done, and we've done this kind of jointly between our architecture and property management division, is we prepare an orientation package for residents, we do that. We provide that to every resident when they first move in, and we walk them through that process. It's kind of tailored to each property based on the energy saving features that we have installed, but I think that's probably actually, I don't know if it's a best practice. I will tell you that's what we currently use. So
Great, thank you.
I would definitely encourage you to check out Enterprise Community Partners and their website. They have some excellent resources for kind of green operations and maintenance of multifamily properties, and also a whole host of information on green retrofits and capital needs assessments and all of that kind of stuff. So Enterprise is always a great resource for that kind of thing. Your local USGBC can be a great resource for getting information on how to better manage your green buildings and things like that, but Enterprise is always a good one.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who joined us.
Janet, I wanted to add one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please, go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time, and I know Alex won't toot his own horn, but one that we're finding in the work that we've been doing either in Virginia or in the Southface study is that the advocates for green, as their own source of education, is something that is really been working well in the industry as far as educating professionals or just working with people to make sure that the process of continuing and improving green building is happening. So we are seeing that definitely outside of kind of a formal education system. Having someone who understands and knows different buildings and what happens in them, we see that as very important towards helping the process.
Thank you so much. Sorry to try and bring this to a close. I know that you all had some great comments, and I know there are some questions we didn't get to, but I will send out a follow-up email to everyone who joined us on the webinar with ways that you can actually reach out to our panelists to follow up with them about some of the questions that we weren't able to get to. So thank you to everyone who attended the webinar today. Thank you to Capital One and Layla for your financial support of NHC's webinar series. And thank you so much to Alex, Andrew, and Orlando for sharing some of the data from your forthcoming report. We are very excited to see the actual final reports, as well as some of the experiences at Community Housing Partners. We hope to have future webinars where we're sharing all the new research projects that have been suggested here today by our attendees. To learn more about other webinars and events happening at the National Housing Conference, please visit www.nhc.org to find out how to connect with us on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.